So it's going to
Yeah.
go. Hello, guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Master Your Mental podcast. I'm super excited about this one, you guys, because we have such an awesome special guest today. Her name is Tatyana Frost. She is a mental health advocate and writer, and she uses her Instagram page, Bipolar Rights, to educate and empower people who have or know someone with bipolar disorder. And you guys know this is a topic that is very close to my heart, because I was also diagnosed bipolar as well at 19. So I'm super excited to get into this conversation with Tatyana today because she's super, super cool. And you guys are going to learn a lot about her today and her story. So Tatyana, thank you so much for coming out on the podcast and making the time to get into this conversation with me.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled. I'm so excited to be here and to be talking to you. I'm super pumped for the awesome conversation we're about to have about so many important topics. So I'm like beyond the moon. Is that a phrase that people say?
I think it is. I like it. I
don't know. I might have said it wrong. Someone let me know.
Beyond the moon. I like it. I like it though. So yeah, I mean, I'm so excited too, because you guys, we connected on Instagram. I'm not sure like how, but we got connected and we were chatting, and I love what she talks about. I love how like open, raw, and vulnerable she is. So I instantly was like, this is a really cool chick. And I'm like, I need to have her on the podcast. So we were talking, but before we go ahead and just dive on into it, just tell us, a little bit more about you and just what really just lights you up.
What lights me up? A little bit about me. So I was diagnosed with bipolar when I was 17, and I didn't really start getting into advocacy around it until I was 18, 19. So it took me about a year to kind of come to comfort with myself around it. And since then, I've really changed gears a little bit to address this part of my life that is really important to me, and I know is important to others. I am a psychology major, but I'm working as a computer scientist right now. So like all the best of both worlds. And I started my Bipolar Rights page so that I could form a community that I wish that I had it when I was 17.
Right.
I was telling my boyfriend that the other day. People will DM me, and I love that. They'll DM me and tell me their stories or ask for advice. And it really it opens my eyes to the fact that there are so many more people than you think who are going through the same exact thing. And it's the most beautiful community. And I'm so glad I did it. And I recommend everybody else go do it.
Yes, you guys, she is so cool. I will link her page in the show notes for you guys to check it out. It is Bipolar Rights on Instagram. I'll put the link on there, but check it out. It's so cool. She is just awesome. And I love your approach to it. Like, it's so positive, because I feel like sometimes with, when we're talking about topics, like at least in my experience, when I was younger and I was like on the internet trying to do like research and like learn more about bipolar, like what is this thing that I was diagnosed with? I feel like it was always like more of like a negative connotation. Like I didn't see people on the internet being like, I'm bipolar and this is, why it's not like the end of the world, and kind of talking about more positive aspects and kind of like in terms of treatment, in terms of moving forward. And because there's really so much that we can do, but I feel like sometimes the conversation can be so much on like the struggle and the problem and like the trauma that goes along with it, that we really aren't able to see that there is a path forward because we're so focused on this stuff. So I'd love to ask, like, for you, like that's what I think is super cool about her also, you guys, is she is also writing a memoir. So how did you get started in this process of writing your story? Just tell us about this, because I think it's super cool.
Yeah. So I have always wanted to write a book. I didn't know exactly what it would be about. I didn't know if it would be fiction or nonfiction, but I've always been a writer. Actually, when I was like 15, I did a lot of freelance journalism and I loved writing. Then, I started writing a book when I was 14. Actually, it's called Exit. It's unfinished. It's nonfiction.
Oh, that's cool. So it's not done yet, but it's still.
No, it's not done yet.
Okay. That's cool.
But I knew I always wanted to publish a book. I just never knew what it would be about. And about a year ago, I made a dramatic move away from home, and it was really a turning point, and was a very hard thing to deal with emotionally for me and a lot of my loved ones. It was not, it wasn't a positive moving away. It was a very negative experience. And I sat there in this new space in a very traumatized and emotionally vulnerable place. And I needed to just like get everything out. I have kept a diary of my whole life from like 5 to current day. And I've always found that writing is such a beautiful outlet for myself. When I write about my experiences and my feelings, it almost feels like once that they're on the page, they've left me. Like they're not there anymore. They've physically left my body and been put on the page. And it's always been such an important way for me to process. And so after I moved, I knew I wanted to write a memoir about bipolar because I remember being diagnosed and not having anyone to talk to about it and not having any role models to look up to, and reading other people's memoirs as a way to feel connected and to feel understood. And I wanted to do that for someone else. I wanted to be the book that someone could pick up and read and feel less alone.
Oh,
And
I love
so
that. Oh my
thank you.
gosh.
So I started writing and it was crap. And, I word vomited a ton of words, like probably like 100+ pages. And I was like, oh, thank God. But then I realized, wait, I can do this. I can like, actually, I'm a good writer. I can write a book, like no biggie. And now I'm into it. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a lot harder than I thought it would be. But it's still in the works, and it is a really rewarding and beautiful process that has helped me to reflect on my life and my experiences, and also reframe my own thoughts about my experiences. When I look back, I think about, sometimes we see it in this light of this was so awful and this all ruined things. It was so negative. But writing this memoir has really helped me to switch that perspective, rather than seeing an experience as so traumatizing and emotionally draining and terrible, seeing it as a learning experience and shifting that negative to a positive.
Oh, that's so
And making sure
important.
just making
Oh my
sure
gosh.
that's the message that's coming across, is not that all these terrible things happened to me and, I was forced to grow. And while that's true, it's also all these things happened, but they were so important for my development and for my growth. And they were crucial to making me the person I am today. And I'm glad about it.
I just love like that outlook that you have, like what you said right there about taking a negative experience and trying in like some form or fashion to reframe it in the form of a lesson or something, something that you could take from that moving forward to help you along your journey. Cause I feel like I relate to that so much, especially what you're talking about with keeping a diary and journaling and like having that, because I feel like for me and a lot of other people who I talk to who are bipolar, because I started this community of it's other women who've also been diagnosed bipolar, and we have like big supportive community, and everyone, we have weekly meetings and we talked about journaling, and so many of them were saying how helpful journaling has been, and just in terms of getting that down on paper and then being able to go back and reread it later and say, oh wow, like this is what I was feeling. This is what was happening at this time in my life. And this is like how I was dealing with this. And I feel like what you said is so true. Like just in terms of, being able to move forward from things and like have that written down in a place where you can go back and like even show that to someone else, like show that to a friend or, someone you're with, or husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever it is in your life that you want to open up to, or have, maybe like show them something that you feel like is too hard to express just by saying it. You can be like, hey, like, here's this thing I wrote. You can check it out. Like, here's what it is. Cause I feel like sometimes, like, especially with, like we talked about this earlier before recording, just kind of like the stigma with like talking about being bipolar, having this diagnosis, and just having that fear like inside of, oh my gosh, like what is this person? How are they going to react to this? How are they going to take this? Are they gonna understand it? Or are they going to think it's weird that I'm like telling them this?
Mhm.
So I just love that about you, and how you have this like whole attitude of you're going to do it anyway, because you know, in doing it, you're going to help somebody, and you're going to help
Yeah.
someone connect with you and say, oh, wow, like look at this girl on Instagram. Like she's so open and vulnerable about this experience. So maybe that can help have them see you and say, oh, wow, now maybe I can be open with my family or my friends,
Mhm.
because it is,
Yeah.
like you said, it is something where you do feel really alone, because sometimes you feel like there's not a lot of people you can tell this to without feeling like it's like a weird topic or, you know, something like that. So I'd love to ask you, you know, in terms of like being diagnosed bipolar, like how has that impacted or influenced the work that you do as a writer?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think being diagnosed bipolar was really tough for me in the beginning. You know, it has a reputation of being such a negative label. And that was so hard for me to accept and deal with afterwards. And it took me a really, really long time to even say the word bipolar. I wouldn't even say it because I
Mm-hmm.
was terrified. I did not want to be identified as that. I did not want to be labeled as that. I wanted nothing to do with it. And as far away as I could get from it, I would. And I realized that when I distance myself from this label that has the negative connotations, I'm also distancing myself from making a change of that label.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
I'm accepting that negativity when I do that. I'm just saying it's negative, and I'm not helping anything. I'm just continuing to perpetuate this stigma within myself, which is awful because I should know that it's not bad, you know? And so, I realized at one point, you know, I don't want to be that person who hides such an important part of themselves. I don't want to. And so when I was deciding to write the book, I decided that I wanted to add my personal diary entries into it because that adds a level of vulnerability and truth and like just being raw that I really, really thought was important in order to shift the idea of what someone who has bipolar is like, because I've seen it so many times. It's so
Mm-hmm.
frustrating when a
Yeah.
Hollywood movie or media perpetuates, you know, we're crazy and we're impulsive and we're going to ruin your life and
Yes.
get away from her. I hate it because, yeah, I got some issues,
Yeah.
but I'm chill,
I
you
love
know, and
it. Oh my
I
gosh. I love
felt
that you say that. Oh,
I just felt that it was
wow.
my duty. If I was going to write a book about my experience with bipolar, I felt that it was my duty to rewrite the narrative about the stigma because it's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
It is. And it really bugs me, especially when I think a lot of it has to do with ignorance, which, you know, what are you going to do about that? Except educate people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what my bipolar page on Instagram is about. It's to educate and empower because I want people who have bipolar to also know that, you know, you're not alone. You're not crazy. You're not broken. There's nothing that needs to be fixed about you. You just got some shit going on. We all
Yes.
do. We
Oh,
all have our shit.
I love
It's
that.
how
Oh my
we
gosh.
manage our shit that matters. It's not the shit. I don't give a
Yes.
fuck about the shit you have. It's how you deal with your shit, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And there are some people that heavily identify as being their mental illness, which isn't necessarily healthy, which is
Mm-hmm.
why I really try to focus on myself and say, I have bipolar. I am not bipolar because
Yes.
I'm not my mental illness. It's like saying I am cancer. No one says that.
I
No
know.
one says, you know, so writing the book and having the page is really, really about rewriting the narrative, changing the stigma into a positive stigma rather than negative. Because,
Mm-hmm.
and all that you can do is educate people. And that's really my goal, is to show people that, you know, we're just people, and we might
Yeah.
have some different struggles, but we're just people, and we
Wow.
deserve to be treated with the same respect that anybody does.
Yeah. And I love that you say that, because that really makes me think of self-care, especially when you're talking about, when you brought up that point of certain people who see themselves literally as their disorder, as their
Yeah.
diagnosis, like how you said, some people say, hi, like my name's Sam, I'm bipolar. And it's like, you identify
Right.
so heavily with that, but then the negative sides of it, right? So like, and almost, and
Uh-huh.
I feel like almost in a sense of like using it as an excuse, like, oh, I got in a fight.
Yeah.
Well, it's because I'm bipolar. Oh,
Yes.
I
Oh,
can't clean anything, or I can't, keep a job because
yes.
I'm bipolar. So it's almost like it's
Yes.
like a thing where people use it as this thing that makes it almost okay for
Yeah.
certain aspects of their life to be the way that they are because you're
Yeah.
bipolar. So it's like
Right.
that. But I love the outlook
Yeah.
that you have on that, because I think that that's so positive, and I feel like it's so important to rely more heavily on the positive than the negative. But I also think it's not,
Mhm.
I'm not saying like don't ignore the negative, like there's no negative,
Yeah.
like of course like there's negative, of course there's going to be days where it's, you don't feel good, you're not in a good mood, you're not in a good headspace. That's going to happen because that's life. But I
Yeah.
love how you
Yep.
talk about, you said managing your shit, like how you manage it, because we all have it, we
Yeah.
all have things, we all have, it's just being a human, and I feel like there's
Yeah.
such a thing that attached to, sometimes if and like you said, like that comes with ignorance, like people not knowing enough about it, or maybe they
Right.
haven't done, maybe they just don't really know, maybe they listen to
Yeah.
like the TVs and the movies where they see
Right.
people on screen who are like throwing stuff, like going to dance
Mhm.
parties, always drunk,
Right.
like always sleeping with everybody, always
Yeah.
doing all these things. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I feel like when you make
Yeah.
it like such a thing where that's bipolar, like this is what it looks
Yeah.
like, and then you actually
Right.
meet somebody who's diagnosed and you're like, wow, like you seem really normal, like that's
Yeah.
weird.
You seem
So
so
yeah, so it's like it's
Yeah.
confusing. So that makes me want to
Yeah.
ask you, like I would love to get your take on this. So like in terms of self-care, like what do you have a self-care routine, and if you do, what does that look like?
Yeah. Something that's really important to me for my self-care is exercise and being outside. Those keeping my body moving, being out in nature is so important to me because like I love it doesn't it's not even like intense exercise. Like I'm not like doing crunches or anything. I just like to go for a run or a stroll outside and take some time for me. I think it's really, really important. I think, okay, so I think a lot of people think that self care has to be like you do face mask and you go to the spa and you take a bubble bath and, you have to do all these things, but it can be way more simple than that. It can be just taking a moment and breathing through a stressful situation. It can be, I mean, I love bubble baths. I was having a discussion the other day about the issue that I have that they don't make enough bubble bath soap for adults,
I
which
love
is
that.
true.
Oh my gosh.
And like, I love my bubble baths and I love my standard self care, but I also think we need to highlight the importance of smaller ways to take care of yourself. I very commonly, if I'm in a big group of people or if I get drained socially, I take my 15 minutes and I go in another room and I collect myself and I take because I'm an introvert, I take my time to recharge. And that is a form of self care that preserves me, really. Taking those little moments of time that a lot of people may say, well, self care has to be in like soap and, meditation and yoga. And it doesn't. It really
Yes.
doesn't.
Oh, I
Self-care
love
could be
that
like
you say that, because
self-care.
it's so true.
I mean,
Oh,
self-care can be, I was doing it just before this, eating ice cream in bed, watching Netflix. Like
love
that's
it.
self-care to me. Any time where you are putting yourself first for your well-being is self-care, you know? And so I really try to incorporate self-care in my everyday routine, no matter what it is, big or small, as long as it's just me, you know, relaxing, being with myself and my thoughts, processing anything I need to process, and taking care of myself. And I think,
Wow. I love that how you talk about the small aspects of that. Cause I feel like
mhm,
you're so right. You're so right. Cause I feel like we see, especially like online or like, talking to people, like it's like sometimes people feel like they don't have enough time for it.
Yeah.
Or they have a
Yeah.
family, or they have kids, or they're
Yeah.
in college, they're working all these jobs, they're doing all this, they're all over the place, right? And they're like, I don't have
Yeah.
time for it. And I love how you say, literally, you can take like 2 minutes, you can take 5
Yeah.
minutes, you can
Well,
do, I love that.
I mean, self-care, I mean, I am really big on mindfulness. And mindfulness, the most amazing part about it is that you can literally do it at any time. Anytime. Everything can be done mindfully. It doesn't have to be done mindfully, but everything can be done mindfully. If, you could have meeting to meeting to meeting, but if between every meeting you walk mindfully to that next meeting, or you mindfully walk to get yourself a cup of coffee, that can be your 5 minutes of self-care. As long as it is you collecting yourself, putting yourself first, self-care, dude.
Yes. I love that.
Mindfulness is a great way. Yeah.
No,
Mindfulness, I think, is the
mine.
easiest way to take care of yourself in that moment. Just being present and doing like just a body scan of, how am I feeling today? Am I okay? Do I need a minute to relax? And if you do need a minute, taking that when you can. It doesn't have to be right away, and I think another important thing of self-care is making time for it. You know,
Yes,
Everyone can look at their
scheduling
schedule.
2
Yeah, everyone
minutes.
can look at their schedule and say, oh shit, I don't have fucking time for self-care. Make time. It's important. Make time, whether it's you taking a poo on the toilet.
Yes.
Make the time.
Whatever it is. I love
Right.
how you say that. I love how, because you guys heard it right here. Just make the time. And I feel like that's the thing, is like, I feel like it's so much easier to go to, I don't have time. Cause it's easy. It's
Yeah.
so easy to say like, oh, I
Yeah.
don't, cause I feel like it's easier to feel that way when you have a lot going on, when you're doing a lot of
Yeah.
things, when you're over here running around doing this, you're in school, you're
Yeah.
trying to work on this thing. And it is easy to say, oh, well, I don't have time, to go on a walk, or I don't have time
Right.
to do what this girl's doing or what this guy's doing over
Yeah.
here, but you have time to do
Mhm.
what you love and what you
Yeah.
enjoy, whether that's reading a book, like you said, going outside and just sitting there and looking at the
Yeah.
plants, or being in a garden, like
Mhm.
whatever, it doesn't matter how big or how small. I think that's so awesome that you talk about like emphasizing the small and
Yeah.
emphasizing scheduling that, because like anyone could just go in, to write to a written down calendar and write on your calendar or in your phone, say, okay, I'm going to schedule, 2 minutes at 12:30 for 2 minutes. I'm going
Yeah.
to sit out here and do a journal entry, or I'm going to go and I'm going to make a cup of tea and walk
Mhm.
around my house or something, like something like that, because I feel like that is so helpful, because that, like, no matter how small it seems, like you might sit there and say, oh man, like, what is that going to
Mhm.
do? Is that going to make a
Yeah.
difference? It compounds. It really does.
Yeah.
Like if you do it
It
every
does.
day for 2 minutes, like
Yeah.
something, like I love how you bring that up, because
Mhm.
I feel like sometimes it does get stressful. Like when you think about it, when you're like, oh, like I have to make time for like self-care. Like, how am I going to do this? I
Mhm.
have to like, cause
Yeah.
it's like on top of all this other stuff, it is easy to feel
Yeah.
overwhelmed. But I feel like when you just do
Yeah.
it, like right now, I'm going to go on my phone. I'm going to look at my calendar. I'm going to put literally a 2 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute time slot. This is time for me. I'm going
Yep.
to not be on my phone. I'm not going to be checking my emails. I'm going to be
Yeah.
sitting here in this moment, enjoying the fact that I have this life, that I'm alive, that I'm
Yeah.
breathing, that I'm able
Yeah.
to get up and walk around, and just even the little things, appreciating
Yeah.
that, because it
Yep.
brings so much joy. And that's really what I think is huge that you talked about, especially like stressing that point and, really emphasizing that. So, one of the things that I always love to ask people on this podcast is, because it's the Master Your Mental podcast. It used to be the Cricket Illness podcast, but now it's the Master Your Mental podcast. So I'd love to ask you, like, what are you currently doing right now in this moment or in this stage in your life to just master your mental? So that could be anything, like any way you interpret that question, like, and take it. What are you currently doing right now in this moment to master your mental?
I, I could have 5 million answers to that question, and I'm going to
Yes.
hone in. I'm going to hone in on just, I think, what the most important thing is. There's been so much happening in my life, so much stress and change and adaptation lately. And, it's been stressful. It's been hard to adjust. But I think something that's been really important for me to recenter is to, I find myself a lot of times comparing my life to other people's and worrying that they're so much farther ahead of me, or, why am I not working harder? And lately I've been needing to take a minute, take a step back and just say, you're in a really good place. I think the biggest thing I do for myself is really make an effort to reframe my thinking. And it's very difficult. And I've been practicing it for many years. Years ago, when I was first hospitalized, I had a psychiatrist. And this is the best piece of like little advice or little help that I've ever been given. I tell this to everyone who struggles with kind of those intrusive thoughts. When you have an intrusive thought that's negative, what you do is you put it in court. You have, a jury, and you have a judge, and you have the defendant and the prosecutor, and you put that negative thought. And let's say our negative thought is, nobody likes me. You show the evidence in your mind for why that is true, and then you show the evidence for why that is false. And when you do that and you look at it in the evidence, the truth, the facts that you can actually come up with, majority of the time, not all the time, but majority of the time, I have found that when I say something like nobody likes me and I look at the facts of that, it's not actually true. When you say something like nobody likes me, and then you say, well, what's the proof? How do I know this is true? And then usually you don't come up with real things, especially when you look at why is this false? If I look at why is this true, I could say, well, my friend didn't text me today, or, I haven't talked to my mom in a week. And then you look at why is this false? And you say, well, I have like a lot of friends who rely on me. I have, people that love me. At least my cat is my friend. So that is the best advice that I've ever been given. And it is hard to do. It's not easy.
I love that. I feel like that is like one of the coolest things I've ever heard on this podcast. That is so cool.
Oh my
gosh.
It was when I heard her, when she told me, I was like, I don't care. But
right?
Then
yes.
I was like, whatever, it's like psychobabble, you're like hippie doctor shit. And then I actually started trying to use it, and it was difficult. It's very difficult. It takes practice and wanting to be better and reframe your thinking, but it works. It really, really works. And now it's so annoying because even when I'm sad and I just want to be sad, I can't be, because my brain is like, that's not true. Stop thinking that. And it's so irritating. Those times where you just want to put on like a sad song and be miserable. And then my brain literally is like, none of these things are true. Why are you lying to yourself? And I'm like, oh, that's so irritating.
I love that you bring that up, because I can tell you just from like personal experience, I used to be like that so much. Like the majority of my time I would spend like making sad playlists. Like every time I listened to music, it was sad, depressing. And now today I'll do, like, I literally would have a moment where I'm like, I want to I don't know why, but I'm like, I want to feel like
Me
that.
neither.
It's like weird. Like, I'm like, why? But like, I want, and then I'll try and I'll turn on the sad song, and then I'll be listening to it. And it's like, I can't even make it through the whole song without being like, what am I doing? Like, what is this? But I feel like that's part of, that's what's the most beautiful thing that I found, in terms of like being diagnosed bipolar and like having this whole journey of like going from, like you talked about, going from this place of, carrying the stigma and like not knowing if you'll ever reach a point where you're fully like able to talk about it in publicly, or like with your friends or anybody who knows you. And then now that you've done that, it's like almost like just checking, you're just progressing and growing and moving forward. And it's almost like, I feel like once you kind of get on that path and you start to notice like, oh, wow, like I really am different now. I really am, using my time better now. And I really am, you notice how you speak to yourself. I feel like is a big thing. Like you notice like, wow, like I used to tell myself all the time, like you said, like, oh, nobody likes me, or no one
Mhm.
cares, or whatever. You know, if you post a photo, you're like, no one's going to want to see that. No one's going to care. Just delete
Yeah.
it. And it's like these
Yeah.
negative things that we tell ourselves. And then we start to realize, like, would you ever say that to another person? Probably not. But
No.
we say it
Yeah.
to ourselves. And then you start to
Yeah.
notice, like, as time goes by, you start to have more of these positive thoughts, uplifting
Yeah.
thoughts, instead of the ones that are
Yeah.
like, what are you wearing today? That's weird. What are you doing? That's
Yeah.
stupid. Instead of having all of this and in your head and like constantly going back and forth, you start to really build yourself up. And I feel like it is, like you said, it's a process, you know, it's not like
It
overnight
is.
we're like, click,
It's hard.
okay,
Yeah.
I'm good, you
It's,
know. It
yeah.
takes time. And I
It's
love
very
that. I
difficult.
love that yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very hard. I mean, I have been in therapy for years, and I've been through so much
Mhm.
fucking therapy. So much. But I genuinely can tell you that I am so, so different than when I started in all the right ways. And I am a completely different person. Thank God. Like, and part of that honestly is just growing up. You know,
Mhm.
half of that is just maturing and learning about life and learning about yourself. But the best thing therapy has done for me is help me get to know myself and who I want to be, you know, because I remember very vividly a time where I did not like myself, where I was not proud to be the person that I am. And then over time and through really, really hard work and difficult conversations and difficult moments, I have slowly, I mean, it can be so stressful because I sometimes feel like, oh my God, I have so much to work on for myself. It's sometimes I see it in my mind as this just massive checklist of things that I have to complete in order to be better in therapy. But then I look back and I go, but look at all the things I've already done. Look at all the ways I've changed to be better already. Like,
Wow. I love
I
that.
can
I
handle
love that
this.
you say that, because I feel like I relate to that so much too. Like, just in terms of, you know, like what, like even right now, like I remember before this interview, like going downstairs to get like a water, like I was working out and I wanted a water bottle. I remember going
Mhm.
into like the clubhouse to get a water bottle. And I remember leaving that after getting the water bottle. And then thinking like, I was really rude. Like that was really rude. Like the person working handed it to me and I just was like, can I have this? And I had this like, I was like rushing. And I'm just like, I just took it and I walked out and I'm like, that was rude. Like I didn't even say thank you. And then I was like, and then I start to like doubt myself and be like, wow, like what the heck is that? And I'm like, why was I like that? Like, why did I act like that? That is so like not okay. Like this person was like, oh yeah, here's a water bottle. And I go, all right. And I like, like storm out of the thing or whatever I was doing. And I feel like it's like little things like that that can either make you feel like you haven't made any progress. Cause I feel like it's always like a little thing, you know, like you've done so
Yeah.
much work and so much progress. And like this
Yeah.
little thing happens and you're like, oh my God, I'm a terrible person. Like I haven't like done
Hmm.
this. And you start to
Yeah.
feel like shit. And then you start to be like, wow,
Yeah.
like I need to go apologize to this person and like say sorry. And like, and I feel like sometimes I would get to that point and then I would hate it. Cause I'm like, why can't I just in the moment not act like that? Like, why do I have to
Hmm.
get to a point where I'm like, I'm going to just leave or what? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. And I'm like, why do I do that? Because every time I do it, I'll reflect back and be like,
Yeah.
that is not what I'm trying to do. And it's like, then you feel really
Yeah.
bad and like guilty about that. And like, you're like, shit, like that was rude. You like,
Yeah.
that was not like, that's
Yeah.
not how you treat people. Like, what the heck is that? So I feel like we start to get in this, sometimes can get in these funks, but I also feel like that's normal because that's just
Hmm.
part of being a human, you know, like we even like
Yeah.
people who aren't bipolar, like who do stuff like when you
Yeah.
get like honked at because you don't go at a red light or people blast their horn at you or like
Right.
flip you off or
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever someone does when they're like not having a good day or something. But I feel like it's almost like for someone like me and like both of us like who've been diagnosed bipolar like makes us I feel like think about it more like oh like
Mhm.
I feel like I'm
Yeah.
getting more aware of
Yeah.
it, I
Yeah.
guess.
I
But
think, I mean, therapy has made me so aware that sometimes I think my problem is that I'm too aware of my shit.
yes.
But I also like what you're saying is there are times, especially being bipolar, there are times where I have a really good day and then I take a step back and I'm like, am I okay?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Yeah.
am I manic? And then you have like a really bad day and you're like, fuck, like, do I need to see my doctor? Like, do I need, like, what is happening? And that was something I really had to like understand and overcome for myself, was knowing that I can have a good day or a bad day without being manic or depressed. I think the biggest transition for me after I was diagnosed and after I was getting the proper treatment was recognizing a normal range of emotions, because you're like, you can't see it, but you're out here.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're like, come within this normal kind of box of like, okay, this is the normal up and downs, and getting to know that and spending every day that's a good day feeling like, oh God, do I need to like see my therapist? Do I need to see my doctor? Am I okay? Am I manic? Am I depressed? And then realizing, oh wait, normal people have mood swings too. Like normal people aren't just like
Right.
neutral all the
right.
time. And I think a little preachy, but like something that people do that annoys me more than anything else in the whole wide world is when I'll be like, oh yeah, like it'll come up that I'm bipolar and they'll be like, I think I'm bipolar too. Like, I just get so, and I'm like,
I know. I've had that happen. I'm
so
just like,
many
oh, I
times.
don't know. And but
So many
it
times.
is funny. Like, I don't know. It's just, it is different. But you know what?
Yeah.
Honestly, like I love this conversation so much. Like
Mm-hmm.
this has just made my
Aw.
entire day.
Yeah.
Like I'm so glad
Oh,
that
you're so cute.
I'm so glad that we did this. Like, I'm so happy we set this
Yeah.
up and like found each other and like got to talk about this, because you just brought so many great points to the table, like so many awesome
Thanks.
insights into this, like into like what is it like being
Yeah.
bipolar? What is my diagnosis been like? What is this like writing a memoir? Like you've
Mm-hmm.
really explained this in such a beautiful way that like I think is going to help so many people listening be like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. This girl is so cool.
Yeah.
And she is, you guys. So please go check her out. I will put the link in the show notes to follow her on her Instagram and all the things. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening, whether it is the daytime or the nighttime. I hope that you guys have a great rest of the day. And thank you so much, Tatyana, for coming on and making the time to chat with me. It's been so awesome. Can't wait to publish this
Yay.
episode. Woo!
Yay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye, guys.